So starting on July 1st, World of Warcraft is going to be introducing one of the craziest events we've ever gotten, and it's going to last until July 29th, meaning this is essentially going to be a month-long event, or more specifically, 2 events, because we're getting both the Greedy Goblins event and the Collector's Bounties buff, and both of these events combined is going to allow for some of the craziest cosmetic farming we've ever had in World of Warcraft, and that's going to be both a ton of new cosmetics and cosmetics from pretty much the entirety of the history of the game. So first, let's take a look at the Collector's Bounty buff. Now, this is essentially just a buff to your character or a buff to the entirety of the game. It's not actually adding in any new content, but the buff it's giving is completely ridiculous. So during the Collector's Bounty buff, foes in legacy dungeons and raids find themselves overloaded with extra treasure. Defeat them once again to collect their bountiful rewards for you and your warband. If you've been on the hunt for rewards that have been eluding you, now's the time to get them. The following will have drop rates increased by up to 10 times and sometimes 25 times. So keep in mind, that's not percent, that's times, that's multiplying. While your chance for transmog loot drops is doubled in legacy, so pre-Dragonflight raids and dungeons, there's also a handful of other things being buffed. So all pre-Dragonflight legacy mounts from legacy dungeons and raids, the Eye of Sulfuras from the Molten Core, the Golden Hearthstone card from the Nighthold, which is just a transformation toy, the bindings of the Windseeker from Molten Core, the Warglaves of Azeroth from Black Temple, and the bow from Sunwell. So this is just a massive buff to the drop rates of pretty much all the cosmetics. Now, some things are excluded. All time walking content is excluded. I don't know why this is the case. I'm presuming this is specifically just for the mount, which doesn't really make sense. But also pets and toys don't have an increase except for the Golden Hearthstone card from the Nighthold. That one's specific. Now, if you're for some reason somebody that just wants to collect everything without this buff, you can actually go to innkeepers in any of the capital cities and turn this buff on and off. I'm not sure why you would want to turn it off, and by default it's going to be active. But just to go back through that, all transmog loot drops are going to be doubled in everything pre-Dragonflight. So that includes any of the super rare transmog. Pretty much anything you can be getting from bosses is going to be doubled. Now, some people did do some testing on the PTR, and it seemed like pretty much everything from bosses will be getting the buff from this. So even things like trinkets and necklaces and stuff like that, I'm not sure if that has been changed since PTR, but that's how it was working. But this is honestly the thing I'm most excited for, just going and trying to get some of those really rare transmog items and just having the chance for them to drop being doubled. But then on top of that, we have the long list of essentially a lot of the old school legendaries having massively increased drop rates, and then all pre-Dragonflight mounts from dungeons and raids are getting their drop rates increased by 10 times, and we don't know what's increased by 25 times. It doesn't specify here, so maybe some of those mounts are also increased by 25x. So this event is essentially just a massive buff to all cosmetics. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. There may also be the possibility that things like BOE drops are also increased, because it doesn't specify that the, say, transmog drop rate increase has to come from bosses. It just says from raids and dungeons. So there is a possibility that some of those BOE drops that usually sell for a lot of gold could also have that drop rate increase. If that's the case, I'll definitely be doing videos on that. So that's the first out of 2 events, just a massive buff to a majority of the cosmetics throughout almost the entirety of the history of World of Warcraft. And while there's no new specific content, I think this is actually a really cool event. So many people are going to be going back and just farming absolutely every dungeon and raid pre-Dragonflight, and there's so much content there, and this is just going to feel so worthwhile to go do. Everybody's just going to be getting on and grinding a bunch in July, and it's a super easy event to do, but I think most players that care anything about cosmetics or transmog or mounts are really going to enjoy doing it. People are already talking about min-maxing and optimizing this, setting up all of their alt armies with like speed sets and sitting them in front of all the instances they want to go farm. So it should be a really good time for the first event. But the second one is bringing back an event we had previously, just massively buffing it and adding some absurdly good rewards from it. Now, the second event being the Greedy Goblin event, which was an event to celebrate the launch of Diablo 4, where a portal would spawn every hour in one of the major cities, a goblin would spawn out of it, the dozens or hundreds of people there would all try to tag it, kill it, and try to get loot from it, and there was a bunch of different cosmetics from that. And this is the same event, just massively buffed with a bunch of new mechanics and a bunch of new unique rewards. The first one being Anarius' Charger, which I don't think is an updated model, just a recolor of Tyrael's Charger, which if I'm not mistaken was a mount you got from, I think, pre-ordering Diablo 3, but I think this one looks much cooler. You'll notice that pretty much all the rewards from this Greedy Goblins event are all like really dark, which just look really cool, including this mount. But they go on to give some more information. So portals spawn every 60 minutes on the hour, and an icon of the portal location appears in Stormwind, Orgrimmar, and Dornogal maps if you're in that zone. So every hour, a portal will spawn in each one of those areas, and it also gives you the locations here, but if you're in that city, you'll just be able to see them. And that's essentially what the event was previously. It was just those 3 portals that would spawn every hour, and you would go kill them. That's pretty much all you would do, but there's a ton of additional things added with the event this time that makes it much more interesting. So then we have portals and portal storms in the Undermine. So portals abound in the Undermine, but spawning times and locations are a bit different. Killing any Undermine rare has a chance to trigger a portal spawning a treasure goblin. Now, I think there was some type of like cooldown with this on the PTR, but we're not sure if that's how it's going to go live. So you're also going to want to be treasure hunting in the Undermine. And then treasure goblins have gotten word that great loot can be nabbed in the Liberation of Undermine raid, defeat certain bosses, and there's a chance that it will trigger a portal to spawn. So if you're a raider, you'll be able to get these, but if you're not, a really good thing will probably be just to queue up for LFR as you're doing the other timed portals and maybe hunting for rares. You're queued up for LFR, and going through the LFR version of Liberation of Undermine just has a chance to give you even more portals. And then if that isn't enough, try to survive the portal storms. At the quarter hour, every hour, a portal storm can spawn another 5 portals. Not only are these portals enhanced with additional affixes, but they each have a chance to hand deliver pesky treasure goblins for even more chances to grab loot. So keep an eye on your map for the icon to lead you to where to go. So now they're also adding just this additional chance for portal storms. They can have a bunch of additional portals, and they can have these additional affixes on these portals, which we'll also go over. But this is just, again, a bunch of additional goblin spawns, which is also just really cool. Having these storms where it spawns a bunch of different goblins you have to chase around and try to kill with a bunch of other people is much more interesting than just a single goblin every hour. But that brings us to the goblin affixes and elixirs, which is how you can kind of manipulate these portals. So treasure goblins are more dangerous now that they carry more affixes from their world. Icons on top of both the summoning portal and the treasure goblin itself will indicate what affixes the treasure goblin currently has applied. Customize what affixes a treasure goblin will have by tossing special elixirs on the goblin summoning portals. But beware, adding more affixes to the portal will increase the number of goblins that can spawn. So essentially you are adding affixes to the portal that spawns the goblins to give them affixes like it's Diablo, but also can spawn even more goblins. And this is outside of the portal storm. You can actually add these elixirs and affixes to any portal, including the main city ones. And there's a whole long list of them where you're just getting these elixirs from killing goblins, and then you can just throw them at the portal and it will add an affix. I think you can have up to 4 affixes or can on the PTR. And I think if you had 4 affixes, it would spawn 2 more goblins, so 3 total if I'm not mistaken. And the additional goblin spawns seems to be based upon how many affixes you give. But there's just a long list of different elixirs that give different affixes. There are a lot of things you could expect. They spawn puddles, they spawn hordes of demonic bovines, they hurl magma at players, so kind of affixes you would expect from most ARPGs. But that's not the only change to this event, because they're also changing how you actually earn the rewards, and it's significantly better. So you earn Hellstone shards from Hellcolor chests that are both dropped by treasure goblins from this event and from completing activities during the Greedy Emissary event. And then you'll be able to exchange these shards that are just a currency at a new NPC located in Dornogal, and he will be selling hellish armor sets that we'll get to and other goodies. Your first 10 Hellcolor chests weekly across your warband will always yield Hellstone shards, and Hellcolor chests can also obtain Valor stones and other worldly items. So these chests are also going to be giving you other things besides the Hellstone shards, but these are essentially chests you you get from killing any of the goblins, but from also doing pretty much any of the weekly quests in Dornegal. So just doing any of the weekly quests in the War Within normally gives you that chest. It will now be giving you this second chest pretty much always. Now the first 10 of these chests weekly on your warband will give you guaranteed Hellstone shards and a bigger chunk of them, but every chest after that can also still give you Hellstone shards, and based upon the PTR, it's a really high chance. It just gives you a bit less every time you get it, but the amount of Hellstone shards you're getting and the amount of chests you can get, it seems to not be a super big grind. So I don't think we have to be worried about this being like some crazy grind you have to do constantly. It's a month long. I don't think you should have an issue getting all the cosmetic items from this, even when not grinding this like crazy. But that brings us to all of the other rewards besides the new Anarius mount. And the first and biggest one is recolors of the tier 2 remakes we got with the 20th anniversary. So if you've seen or played during the 20th anniversary, there was remakes or updates for all of the tier 2 sets, and any class that didn't exist back then also got their own sets, and pretty much all of them were really well received. And I actually think some of the new sets for classes that didn't exist back then are actually some of the best, but we're getting recolors of a set for every single class, and they're all very dark. They're all Diablo inspired. The one that they keep liking to show off is the Judgment set for Paladins that's all red and black. So just a bunch of really cool, really high quality armor sets for all the classes, all much darker. Some of the best is that Paladin one. The Warrior one looks really good. I really like the Shaman one as well, but I think a bunch of these are really good. I actually like a lot of these recolors over the original colors. But on top of that, there's also a bunch of other things. There's the Treasure Nabbing Bag, which is like the Treasure Goblin back piece that you could get from the original Greedy Goblin event. You can also get temporary buff charms that are inspired from Diablo 2, where they just give you stat increases when they're in your inventory, but they're turned off in raids, Mythic Plus, and rated PvP. So it's kind of just like open world stuff, or even something like Delves, where you just have these things in your inventory and they give you stat increases. They only last 2 hours, but if you're doing a bunch of farming, you could get some stat increases and go do some non-super endgame content with some additional stats. You'll be able to get a 36 slot bag. You'll be able to get the Belial pet, which is a super red goat. You'll be able to get Tyrael's Charger, so the original mount from the Diablo 3 promotional event. You'll be able to get Wirt's leg weapon transmog, which includes a one-handed mace, which is his fighting leg, a two-handed mace, which is his last leg, and an offhand, which is his haunted leg. So it's essentially like a medieval prosthetic that you get as weapon transmogs. There's also another version of that back piece. It's not specifically a recolor, it's just very similar to it. You can also get a Diablo-themed cloak and hood. You can get a Diablo-themed banner that looks like the banners you could customize in Diablo 3, just so it's more Lilith-inspired for Diablo 4. Then you can get the Tome of the Town Portal, which is another Hearthstone toy. You can get the 12-string guitar, which is another toy. Then you can also get the Livestock Axe, which just looks like the polearms that the bovine enemies in Diablo use. So those are all of the rewards from the Greedy Goblin event, and both of these two events put together is legitimately one of the best times for cosmetic rewards in the game's history. I said that about the 20th anniversary, and that was true, but this one I think is actually going to be better. You can get a similar amount of cosmetic items from just the Greedy Goblin event because you can get all of the class sets through that, but then you also have the massively buff drop rates for pretty much all cosmetic or collection items from everything pre-Dragonflight. And like I mentioned, there's also the possibility that you could even go make some really good gold from this if the BOE items from, say, a bunch of the previous rates are also buffed up with the transmog drop rate increase. So I'm definitely going to be making sure to grind out these events at some point during July, because keep in mind, this starts on July 1st and goes until July 29th. You don't have to grind it on the first day. This is a month-long thing where you're going to have enough time to farm everything you're wanting. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.